I didn't do that. Okay, there we go. Good morning. It is bright and early, 9:30 a.m. on Friday. We are one full week left away from the holidays, although it is now Hanukkah. So happy Hanukkah for all of those for all of you who celebrate Hanukkah. It has been a heck of a year. I am Cate Luzio, founder and CEO of Luminary, but also the host of LinkedIn Live's Goaldigger every Friday. And I am really excited because we have an incredible leader, founder, businesswoman, lawyer, everything, Sharmeen Laka, who is not only a Luminary member and an ambassador, she's become a friend, and we're excited to have you on today. Welcome.
I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
All right, so we are going to dive right in to your story a bit, but I want to back up to a little bit more around growing up. You now run your own firm focused on founders, entrepreneurs, in particular women. You worked at some big law firms, but give us sort of the growing up story, right? Because yes, you might have gone a traditional path, but what was it like growing up? Where did you grow up, and what led you to the legal practice?
Sure. So I'm actually from Seattle. I'm at my parents' childhood home, so it's a little earlier than 9:30 for me. But happy to be here.
I thought you were on the West Coast until after the holidays. I'm sorry.
No. When I commit to something with you, Cate, I always make sure to show up because I always find value in it every time. So so I grew up in Seattle, and I'm from a South Asian background. And a lot of times when you come from, immigrant or minority families, there's a lot of expectation on what type of career you're going to have, and really an emphasis on security. So when I was going to school, I went to the University of Washington. I really tried to focus on different educational paths that could probably provide me with a good career. I went to Seattle University School of Law. I kind of backed into law school, to be honest. I had a degree in literature, and I thought, okay, what's the next step for me? Maybe I'll just go to law school. Turned out to be a very good decision for me. And then, so after that, within my first year of law school, I've always known that I wanted to go to New York. And so I was able to get an externship at the Attorney General's office, and I just picked up and moved at 22. And that was probably one of the best decisions of my life, because I really got to understand the New York market and really get to live in a big city that had so many enthusiastic, hardworking people. As you mentioned, I did all the right steps. I got my first job at Goldman Sachs, then I was at the U.S. Attorney's office, and then I was at a really large international law firm. And when I was there, I just felt like, okay, I had done all of the right things to step on that ladder and get to where I needed to be, but I really just felt like there was something more I needed to be doing. And around that time, I found that I was just unhappy. And so it was really one of those now or never situations where I can't really recall the exact inception of when I decided to start Level Up. But I just decided to, leave the practice I was at and started a website and just go for it. One of the biggest things that I now look back and think it's a very risky move that I made is that I didn't really have much of a business plan. And I know that you are a huge proponent, I'm sure, of having a business plan. And thinking about it now, I'm thinking, that's probably something I should have had a little bit more of an idea of. But sometimes I think that when people have these business plans or they have these big 5-year plans, it could really be sometimes intimidating. You're overthinking a lot of the steps. So I just started, and fortunately, because I'm in a service-based business, I was able to generate income while I was launching. And then, to be honest, I tell this to everybody, this is not just because I'm on this. I always really appreciate that the Luminary was one of the places that really helped my business grow. When you're starting a business as a solopreneur, which I was at the time, it could be a very lonely type of atmosphere. You don't really have a lot of direction or mentors that are easily surrounding you. So when I came into the Luminary, one of the best things was that a lot of the women there were really, really focused on helping other women grow. I've always known that I wanted to also help women, minority founders, startups, because that's just really the generation that I'm a part of and I really understand. And I really want to provide legal services to those people who don't maybe think that they aren't able to get legal services because it might be too expensive or difficult. So that's the long-winded way where I am today.
Oh, this is the thing. It's not long-winded, right? This is the part that we need to keep telling more. Like these stories aren't, one day just picked up and decided to start a successful business. It takes experience. It takes a background. It takes, also a whole hell of a lot of courage and risk. Right. So, and I remember the first day you came into Luminary as a guest and we met and I was sitting in the kitchen and then it was a match made in heaven, but you were just starting to like amplify the business. And I remember when one of the most daunting things in starting Luminary was I had come from the banking background. I had teams of lawyers, right, that would help. And I honestly didn't know where to start when I had written the business plan. I was like, okay, I need to get an LLC. Actually, I didn't even know. I was like, do I do that? Do I do an S Corp? There was so much and it can be really overwhelming. At the time, I'm lucky. My aunt, who's incredible, has 30 plus years in legal practice. I called her. I was like, what do I do here? But most people don't have that. So when you're talking to these founders that think, one of the big barriers to entry is starting the company, right? It's the legal. Most people don't even think about trademarking. I mean, what are the biggest barriers that you see or perceived barriers that you see from founders?
Yeah. So one of the things that I find that founders have the most difficulty with is pretty much what you're saying, knowing the right questions to ask about their business, because there's so many different industries, and depending on what industry you're in, it's really important to know what you need from a legal perspective. And one of the things that I always tell businesses is that rather than doing everything on the onset and getting all your ducks in a row, which is probably the best thing to do, if you are somebody who is bootstrapping, talk to an attorney about what is really the necessary items at the moment, because every dollar as a founder or as a startup really matters. So if you're a product, if you are a business that's going to be going out to the public, like you mentioned, trademarking is huge. If you are a service-based business and your name is Cate Luzio Coaching, you own your name, so you don't maybe necessarily want to trademark that first, but having a proper contract in place is something that you really need to have because you want to waive liability or other issues that might come up. Definitely starting an LLC or getting a legal entity is really the first step, as you mentioned, because what you really want to do is separate your liability. So once you put together a legal entity, what you're doing is you're separating your personal assets from your business assets. And as attorneys, we always think of, the worst case scenario possible. So if you were ever sued, you want to make sure that only your business assets are what are going to be looked to if that unfortunately occurs versus your personal assets. So little things like that to really protect yourself. And if you are on a team, making sure that you have the equity split up correctly. I think especially now, something that I have been noticing a lot is, unfortunately, a lot of businesses that started at the beginning of this year are having to potentially shut their doors. And I know all of us have been on the news, and unfortunately, that's just the reality of small businesses right now. So at that point, if a founder or a co-founder of yours needs to leave or just has to make a pivot at that time based on whatever circumstances they're in, having the right documentation of what the equity split is, how much, if people are on a vesting schedule, meaning they get a certain amount of equity over time after being in the company, all of that is super important, just to make sure you're protected. And especially with women founders, I have found that they're very free with their equity, and they're much more, they value friendship and relationships a lot. And so in business, it's really important to make sure that maybe you have a good lawyer or somebody, a mentor on your side that can say, don't just give it away, value what you are, your equity in your business and everything like that. So it's important.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that, because I have advised a ton of founders, right? Especially in these last 2 years that I've been doing Luminary. There's just, it's a generosity thing, which is great, right? But at the end of the day, it's your business and you've got to protect that. One of the other things that I think people tend to do, and it's both men and women, is to give away information freely. And one of, how important is an NDA, a non-disclosure agreement, especially when you're talking to people before it's even a business, right? As you're, bringing in advisors or just getting information and sort of another glance. I mean, I am a little bit probably more overprotective, just being a banker for so many years, right? But I think it's still important to protect your information.
Right. So I always say to founders and startups to know who you're speaking to. So if you are a business that has a product or a really cool product name or a business concept, you want to get an NDA to the person that you might be pitching to, or even these big entities. So I was recently on TikTok, and one of my associates sent me a video of a woman who came and pitched to, I think it was Ulta, and showed her design. They said they were not interested, and later on they come out with another design. So that's very similar, if not almost exactly the same. These are the types of things where an NDA would have been very, very important at that time. Another thing is you don't want to make it a very long NDA. Nobody who you're just talking to about something, especially if you're asking for something, they don't really want to go through a huge contract before they talk to you, because there's so many other people out there in line hoping for that spot to have that conversation. So keep it very streamlined. If you are a startup that's looking for investment and you're going to an investor, that's actually one of the rare times where I say, don't give an investor an NDA on the onset. When you're asking somebody for something and they're trying to get to know you, a lot of investors, it's just this rule of thumb, they don't really like signing NDAs right on the onset. It's just a bit of a turnoff. So with businesses, knowing who you're working with and really understanding your audience when you're going with legal contracts is important, because generally nobody likes a legal contract. Nobody likes receiving them. Nobody likes reviewing them. So I think that that's really key, because you just got to be realistic in what you're doing with your business. And while it's so important to be really protected, and I have so many people that, hindsight is 20/20 on what they wish they would have done. I also have clients that say, I got really into the weeds in this contract and then I lost the opportunity because I just overdid it. So that's something you really want to balance too.
So let's talk about, I love the word, actually I hate the word balance as far as our lives, right? And anyone that knows me knows that I always say, and I've been saying for 20 something years, I have no balance, right? And I'm not saying everyone should have that. That's just me personally, but you are a woman in the legal services, legal practice. You run your own firm. You're dealing with founders and entrepreneurs and small business owners, and you're a woman, right? But part of what led you to doing this were the experiences that you had in your prior life, right? Mm-hmm. And Goaldigger is about finding our voice. How did you find your voice before you started your company, right? How did you find your voice in the legal profession where, you could speak up, you could talk to the partners or your clients? I think it's really important that it's not, in this world, we're not all going to be founders, right? So what do people, women in particular, in the legal profession, but obviously applicable to any job or any industry, how did you find your voice?
That's a great question. So I've always been, a very outgoing and chatty person. And I've always found that just having a genuine conversation with somebody has always been the best way to break down that barrier of feeling like somebody is above you, or maybe just somebody that's intimidating you. Just to have an honest conversation. And that's actually one of the best ways that I've built my business and found my voice, is by having a genuine conversation. A lot of lawyers, people have this impression of a lawyer that's somebody who's cold, somebody who is really cutthroat. But I think that as a female lawyer, I feel like I have found my voice by being able to just speak to somebody and understanding their problems. And what's interesting to me is that a lot of the clients that I work with, even though I marketed primarily as a attorney that works with female founders,
Yeah.
a lot of my clients are male and they prefer to have female attorneys because we have that feminine touch. We have that compassion and that a lot of attorneys don't have. I often say sometimes I'm half therapist, half attorney, half advisor, half everything, just somebody that people can rely on. So the best way to find your voice in building your business is being authentic. I always say, don't just go out and try to pitch and try to build business. Be authentic in what you're doing. And another thing is have great mentors. So I remember one of the stories I was actually telling my parents this last night, that when I was starting, I really just kind of tried things out and see if it stuck, and then worked from there. So one of the first events that I went to, there was a Q&A, and I always try to make sure that when I'm going to an event, or when I was going to events, make it worth your while. Raise your hand, say something, don't just show up, do something while you're there. I picked up the mic and I just asked my question, and you said, stop, say your name, where you're from, and what you do. And it was in front of an audience, and I took that lesson, and from now going forward, I always make sure to say that. I say my name, what I do, and where I'm from, whatever the question is, just to give that introduction. So these types of lessons that I've learned throughout after I built my practice from mentors like you and other people who've had experience really helped me amplify my voice to be what it is today. And now I'm comfortable in my skin doing those things and making mistakes, but also just knowing that everyone is, a lot of other women that are there, they're there for you. Yeah. And take the lessons that you learn and grow from that. And then slowly your voice will be amplified, and you'll learn from yourself and from others as well.
Did you feel when you were working in the big firm that you had a voice?
So that, I think, was one of the things that really felt, which was one of the turning points for me. I didn't feel like I had as much of a voice. And I know that a lot of people who work for large companies, often you can get lost in that because there are just so many people and different teams and all of that. I felt that I had, every time, you do try to speak up, it is a little bit more going through the process versus just having ownership of what you are and what you're saying and what you're doing. That's something that's more of a personal choice for me that I really needed to have in order to feel value in what I do. And another thing that you mentioned is that not everybody's a founder. So I think we're in this environment where everyone feels like everyone's starting something and we're all watching Shark Tank and everyone has all these great ideas and this is what it means to be successful. But a lot of times being a great employee is such a valued thing. I always say I feel like I'm a great entrepreneur. I'm not a great employee. I know what I'm good at. I hopefully am a great employer, but know what you're good at. And if you are somebody that can help amplify and build a team and really take a business to the next level, by working with them, that's just as important. So yeah, I think that, finding your voice and knowing what you're good at is really the key to making you feel value in what you do and being successful in your career, whatever that is.
It's so funny that you say that. I feel like I am a great employee. Maybe my former employers, the three banks that I worked for, wouldn't agree, but I thrive. I was thriving in the corporate environment, right? I love navigating through the stakeholders and leading big teams, and that complexity really drove me and challenged me. So right. It's something that I'm now a founder, right? I had never, if you would have asked me, I wrote the business plan in March of 2018. If you had asked me February 29th, if I would have, ever started my own company, I would have laughed at you because I always say never, right? Because you never know where you're going to go back to. But I feel like I had a voice because I demanded I had a voice versus someone was giving it to me in the corporate world. And what I saw was not the same for everyone else. And that's one of the reasons why I started Luminary. But for founders, for women, for, sort of in this landscape, it's even harder because we're on video. We're no longer in the offices. We're not at events. as you're advising your clients in particular, and now granted it's the legal side, but how are you talking about yourself and your company? Because oftentimes anecdotally we bring that in when we're advising.
Yeah, so I think that one of the best things about this generation, and people kind of go back and forth on this, is the power of social media, of LinkedIn, of different types of platforms that we can use to really amplify and build our business that way. So what I've always done from the day that I started is I actually started as a virtual practice. And I've always done video calls with my clients because startups and founders have very minimal time. And so going to visit somebody is time off of their clock that they don't really have. So one of the things that I did is always make sure to market myself all across all my social channels and really be clear about the message that I'm sending. And that's been really helpful even throughout this process. I've always done free consultations because I know that people are very educated and they need to be able to build that trust with an attorney. So that's another thing, making sure that you provide at least a conversation with somebody to understand their business and what they're doing without, charging them in advance. I think that's a pretty standard now for lawyers. And I always say, listen, if you are in the service-based business and you are talking to a new founder in a startup, before you start pitching yourself, sit back and listen a little bit about what their needs are and then address that accordingly. A lot of founders and startup owners, we are type A, we like to talk, we like to, we know our business, and that's really what we care about. And so just giving somebody the opportunity to tell them your problems and what they're looking to do, and then you, as a service provider or myself, I sit back, I listen, and I not only advise them on what they're asking for, but even just opening up their eyes to other things that they could potentially be needing from a legal perspective. So social media is really important, making sure that, you have a proper video conference when you are doing a consultation and just being genuine. I know a lot of people are saying, we're on our phones a lot. We're so dependent on social media, but if you look to that on these platforms as really a tool, it doesn't get as much of a situation where you're feeling like you're competing with other people. And from my personal pages to my business page, I found such a difference because I follow totally different accounts and different people. And so there's just so much out there for everybody.
There's so much out there. There's so much content, and it's putting out relevant content, right? If you listen to Gary Vee, it's all about the content, right? So, So when, one of the things, and full disclosure to anyone listening, and we've hired Level Up Legal this past year, right? To do some trademarking for us, and what was not under. I think it's really hard to understand how much work goes into little things. And these aren't little things, right? But little things that founders think, oh, well, I can just do this on my own. It is so much work and requires a ton of expertise. So as far as a founder, when they're looking at their whole business and everything they have to accomplish, what are, from a legal standpoint, the top 3 things that you would say are the most important as you're starting the business?
So I would say filing an LLC and getting a legal entity is a pretty simple administrative process, but the step after that is really important. So knowing if you have partners, knowing how your equity is split, because that I think has been something that I've been dealing with a lot of people who start a business with a friend and say, hey, we're going to go 50-50. Everyone has the best intentions when you start a business, but a lot of times things change. The people who are your friends might not be the best business partner. So having that written down in a document in the right membership interest agreement or shareholder agreement is key. So that's one. Trademarking, a lot of people feel like they can't just trademark online, which you can do, but I would only recommend that if you have a very unique name. So if your company name was something like Uber, that's completely, out there, then fine, you probably don't have any competition. But I've had a lot of clients that have filed trademarks that just did it online, and they get responses, or they have a cease and desist for using something that has been a competitive name, and then they get into panic mode. So that's another thing. The third thing I would say is making sure that you have a proper service contract or contract if you have clients. A lot of times it not only legitimizes your business more, but at the end of the day, what we're looking to do when we are founders and startups is generate revenue. And so especially at these times, people are in difficult financial situations. So you want to make sure that you're getting paid on time, that you're limiting liability. And if you need to get out of a contract because of certain situations, especially in the pandemic, if you are someone who has to go to a venue or be at an event or unfortunately got diagnosed with COVID at this time, you want to be able to get out of your contract without liability and without having any type of penalty. So 3 things: just split your equity appropriately. If you're filing a trademark, make sure that you are getting or doing the proper search and hiring an attorney if you need to at that time, and then having a proper contract in place.
And so as you think about 2021, right? And I know we're going to do some more programming with Level Up in 2021, certainly for Luminary, but as you're thinking about your company, what's 2021 look like for you and Level Up Legal?
So 2020 was an interesting year in the fact that when I was at the Luminary in 2019, in the early part of 2020, I was really just, pedal to the metal. I was really exerting myself a lot and, burning the candle at both ends. And so when the pandemic hit and I came back to my parents' place, I really had a battle between the fact that I really wanted to grow and expand and I had all these plans, and then, having to take a back seat. This is pretty much the story I'm sure everybody feels at this time, but I still was able to grow, and that's really what I want to do is scale. I think that for me, one of the hardest things was balancing the fact that, I can do a lot of the work. I'm good at what I do, but my time is so valuable now. And so being able to scale and being able to make sure that I delegate has been always a challenge for me. So my goal in 2021 is not only to scale a little bit more, but also get a little bit more organized from an outreach perspective. So making sure that I have the proper implementations in place for the way my business is now from a workflow perspective. And then also I really want to start doing more content, potentially doing a YouTube video, making sure that I have the right information out there, because as now people are so comfortable with just finding their information online, having a proper presence is really important. So even though, a lot of my plans that I had were pushed back, I still feel like we're going to enter 2021, in a really positive way. A lot of the founders that I've been talking to are really, really gearing up for a great year. And anybody who has been pivoted, who has created masks, who have created different products that apply to what the situation is now, really show a lot of tenacity and really haven't given up. So that's really encouraging. So for me, it's scaling, and then hopefully all the businesses I work with are feeling, encouraged, and hopefully we can keep building our businesses. It's been an interesting year, but I'm excited.
I am too. I think silver linings, right? And looking, if we've made it this far, we've just got to keep going, right? Sarah LaFleur, who's a friend and a peer mentor, I remember one of the first times I met her, and she just said, as a founder, as an entrepreneur, but even as just a woman in business, just keep swimming, right? You just got to keep swimming, whether it doesn't feel like you're going forward. So tread for a little while, but just keep swimming. Last question that I want to ask is, you are in a service-based business that I am sure you get asked questions all the time, right? Particularly those that want free advice. How do you say no? Because back to the original, women are generous, we're compassionate, we're empathetic. One of the biggest challenges that we have is saying no, pay me for my service, pay me for my value.
Yeah, so that's something that I constantly struggle with, because it's just very natural to me to just be able to provide different types of advice and talk about people's businesses and some legal things that they should think about. 2 things women do is not only give free advice, but undercharge. And that's a lesson that I'm still, trying to understand and build, especially because of the fact that female founders are much smarter with their money and they want to make sure they're getting their value. So I'm actually pretty open with the information I provide because it is really my passion and I really do want to help businesses. So I do offer the free consultations, but at the end of the consultation, what I make sure to do is outline the conversation, but also really the next steps,
Yeah.
making sure that I know that the work I'm actually going to put in to actually drafting and reviewing the business and reviewing the contracts and all of that is compensated for. So I think having a balance, you don't want to charge too much at the front because I do feel like if I would take someone's credit card right away, that I wouldn't have as big of a business. But I think that providing good advice openly is great for referrals and word of mouth gets around. But when charging, I've decided that, in the beginning, it's really hard to understand your hourly or what you should be charging. So one of the things that I've decided is that rather than providing a discounted service or undercutting myself, I would rather give a little bit of free advice than discount myself, because at the end of the day, when you are just building that rapport, that's just one thing. But then if you're constantly changing your hourly or your value or how much you want to charge somebody, it just can get a little bit all over the place. And so you just want to be really hone in on what you're worth, hone in on your hourly, and then decide if it's best for you what your limitation is. So if it's somebody that is asking a little bit, over asking a question, at some points I do have to say, if you want further information, we can enter into an engagement letter and I can let you understand my pricing. If it's somebody who just has a couple of questions, I'm happy to answer them as well. So it's a balance, figuring that out and making sure that I am taking the time, but generally I am always just really free with my time. I enjoy talking to people, so it's something I'm working on as well.
But I like that, have a free consultation, and then if you want to continue, you pay me, right? And I think that's really important as business owners, setting boundaries, right?
Yeah.
There's a boundary. So for those that are watching and who will watch us at a later time, we'll be having Sharmeen in February, a great programming that we're working on. But where can people find you? I've thrown up your Instagram here, but where can people find you and the business so that they can hire you?
Sure. So you can find me on my website, www.leveluplegal.com. I'm on Instagram at leveluplegal and LinkedIn here, Sharmeen Laka. You can also email me, sharmeen@leveluplegal.com. And feel free to connect with me. I love chatting with different founders. Anyone that Cate knows is a friend of mine. So it's always great to chat. And I really appreciate everything that you've done throughout, this year. You've really showed a lot of tenacity with the Luminary. You pivoted and did a digital business right away. And women find so much value in that because you created a space that helps people not feel so isolated. And it actually made me feel like not all is lost. There's still a lot going on and a lot of founders out there. So I appreciate that.
Well, thank you. And we're so proud to have you as part of our community. And we're looking forward to seeing you after the holidays back in the space. For everyone, thank you for joining Goaldigger. Thank you, Sharmeen. Wishing everybody, again, a very safe weekend. Be safe, be healthy, wear a mask. And again, happy Hanukkah to those celebrating. We will see everyone next week at 9:30 Eastern on Goaldigger. Till then, have a great weekend. Thanks, Sharmeen.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.